When a man pushes another off a bridge, desperate to erase his darkest secret, he doesn't realize someone is watching. Hidden in the tall grass, a 13-year-old boy witnesses everything. In that split second, he makes a decision that will change his life forever. He dives into the river. What follows is a story of courage, betrayal, and the unstoppable power of truth. As one boy's bravery uncovers secrets that were meant to stay buried, lives will be shattered, and justice will be tested. Before we dive into this gripping story, let us know where you're watching from, and if you believe one act of bravery can change everything. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories like this. The sun hung low in the sky, dipping behind the treetops, casting long golden streaks across the gently rippling surface of the river. 13-year-old Noah Carter sat on a flat rock near the riverbank, his fishing rod propped up beside him. He adjusted his grip on the makeshift pole, waiting for the slightest tug on the line. For as long as he could remember, this quiet place had been his escape. Life at home was hard. His mother, Lena, worked long shifts at the hospital, leaving Noah to fend for himself most evenings. Money was always tight. A good catch today meant a decent dinner, something more than just leftover rice and bread. The cicadas hummed their evening chorus, blending with the distant sounds of traffic from the bridge upstream. Noah let out a slow breath, savoring the solitude. Here, there were no overdue bills, no worried whispers from his mother about making ends meet. Just him, the water, and the hope of catching something worth keeping. Then a sound split the air. A loud bang. Noah jerked upright, his pulse spiking. It wasn't a car backfiring. It sounded heavier, like something slamming against metal. His eyes darted toward the bridge in the distance. A sleek black sedan had come to an abrupt stop in the middle of the span, its engine idling. Noah squinted through the thick reeds, instinctively lowering himself behind the bushes. Something about the scene felt off. A figure stepped out of the car. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit. He moved quickly to the edge of the bridge, dragging something, or someone, along with him. Noah's stomach twisted. The second figure struggled, their movements weak and sluggish. Their arms flailed, but the larger man held firm. Noah's breath hitched as realization slammed into him. This wasn't just an argument, it was an execution. Before Noah could fully process what was happening, the man shoved the struggling figure over the bridge. A sickening splash echoed across the river. Noah's entire body tensed. The man on the bridge stood motionless for a moment, as if making sure his job was done. Then, he turned back, calmly walked to his car, and drove off, leaving nothing but silence behind. Noah's hands clenched into fists. His first instinct screamed at him to run, to pretend he had seen nothing. But then, movement in the water caught his eye. A hand. It surfaced for just a second before slipping under again. Noah's breath caught in his throat. Whoever that was, they were drowning. For a split second, he hesitated. He wasn't a strong swimmer. The current was fast. The water was deep. But if he didn't do something right now, this person was going to die. Noah made his choice. Heart pounding, he kicked off his sneakers and ran, his bare feet slapping against the damp riverbank as he sprinted toward the water's edge. The jagged rocks cut into his soles, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. The figure in the water surfaced again, their head barely above the churning waves. They weren't going to last much longer. Without another thought, Noah dove in. The moment Noah hit the water, the cold shocked him to the core. The river was always cooler in the evening, but this was like plunging into ice. It stole the breath from his lungs, making his muscles seize up. "Move, Noah! Move!" He kicked out desperately, pushing through the strong current. The dark water swirled around him, making it difficult to see. His clothes felt heavier, dragging him down, but he forced himself forward, eyes darting across the surface. There, just ahead. The man's body bobbed lifelessly, barely staying afloat. His silver hair clung to his pale face, and Noah could see blood streaming from a deep gash on his temple. Noah pushed harder, his arms burning as he fought the current. When he finally reached him, he grabbed the man under the arms and tried to lift his head above water. Nothing. The weight of the unconscious man was dragging him down. Noah's heart pounded. "Come on, wake up!" he gasped, but the man remained still. Noah knew he couldn't hold them both up like this for long. The current was too strong, and he could feel himself tiring. Panic gnawed at his gut. What if he had miscalculated? What if he couldn't do this? Giving up wasn't an option. He adjusted his grip, wrapping an arm under the man's shoulders and kicking furiously toward the shore. Every muscle in his body screamed for relief, but he kept going. Kick, breathe, kick, breathe. The muddy riverbank never seemed to get closer. His lungs burned, his legs ached, and his arms trembled under the man's weight. But then, his fingers scraped against something solid. The shore. Summoning the last of his strength, Noah grabbed onto the reeds lining the riverbank and pulled. His feet finally touched the riverbed, and with a final heave, he dragged the man out of the water, collapsing beside him in the wet grass. For a moment, all Noah could do was lay there, his chest rising and falling in rapid gasps. His limbs felt like lead, his body shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Then, the reality of the situation hit him. He turned to the man. His face was deathly pale, his lips slightly parted. The gash on his forehead was still bleeding, and his clothes were soaked through. But was he breathing? Noah's heart pounded as he leaned closer, pressing an ear to the man's chest. For a terrifying second, there was nothing. Then, a weak, ragged inhale. Noah exhaled sharply. He was alive, barely. But the relief didn't last long. The riverbank was isolated, far from any main roads. His phone was still by his fishing rod, forgotten in his panic. Even if he ran back for it, the closest hospital was over an hour away. The man needed help now. Noah chewed his lip, thinking fast. He couldn't just leave him here. His mother, Lena, was a nurse. She knew how to help people. Maybe she could do something until they figured out what to do next. Decision made, Noah sat up, shaking out his sore limbs. He grabbed the man's wrist, but even lifting his arm was a struggle. This is going to be impossible. The man was taller than him, heavier, and completely limp. Noah adjusted his grip, pulling the man's arm over his shoulder and forcing himself to his feet. His knees almost buckled under the weight, but he dug his heels into the soft earth and started moving. Step, drag, step, drag. Every step was an effort. The walk home had never felt this long before. Each patch of uneven ground, another battle. By the time he reached the edge of his yard, he was soaked, shivering, and completely spent. He barely managed to shove the front door open with his foot before staggering inside. The wooden door creaked as it swung shut behind him. The warmth of the house hit his frozen skin, but he barely noticed. From the kitchen, his mother's voice floated toward him. "Noah, where have you been? Dinners?" Lena turned, her words cutting off mid-sentence. Her eyes widened in shock as she took in the sight of her son, soaking wet, panting, supporting the weight of an unconscious stranger. The bowl in her hands clattered to the floor, shattering on impact. "Noah! What?" Noah barely had the breath to answer. His voice was raw, barely above a whisper. "I found him in the river. Someone threw him off the bridge." Lena's face went pale. For a moment, she just stood there, processing. Then, her instincts kicked in. "Get him to the couch," she ordered, already moving toward the cabinet where she kept her medical kit. Noah nodded, shifting his grip and half carrying, half dragging the man toward the worn-out sofa. As Lena knelt beside the unconscious stranger, checking his pulse, Noah staggered backward, his breath still coming in ragged gasps. His mother was saying something about head trauma, about needing stitches, but her voice sounded distant, drowned out by the sound of blood pounding in his ears. Because on the TV, just behind his mother, the evening news was playing. Breaking news. Business tycoon. Robert Hale reported missing. Noah's stomach dropped. His gaze darted between the television screen and the injured man lying on their couch. Number? It couldn't be, but it was. The man he had just pulled from the river, the man someone had tried to kill, was the billionaire Robert Hale. And now he was lying unconscious in Noah's living room. Noah stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat as he stared at the television screen, the name flashing across the news banner, Robert Hale, the billionaire, the philanthropist, and the half-drowned, unconscious man lying on their worn-out couch. His mother, Lena, was still kneeling beside the man, her fingers pressed firmly against his wrist. She glanced up, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Noah, help me get his shirt off. I need to check for more injuries." Noah hesitated, his eyes flicking between Robert Hale and the news report. Lena must have noticed his expression because she followed his gaze to the TV. Her body tensed as she took in the headline. Business tycoon Robert Hale reported missing, the anchor was saying. Authorities have found his car abandoned near Riverway Bridge, leading to growing concerns about foul play. Lena snatched the remote and turned off the TV. She exhaled sharply and turned to Noah, her dark eyes sharp with questions. "Noah," she said slowly, "are you absolutely sure you saw someone push him off that bridge?" Noah nodded quickly. "Yes, a black sedan stopped in the middle. A man got out and shoved him over. I saw it." Lena pressed her lips together, her mind clearly racing. After a beat, she turned her focus back to Robert. "Well, right now, he's still alive, and that's what matters." She grabbed a clean towel and dabbed at the dried blood on Robert's temple. The wound was deep, but had finally stopped bleeding. Lena let out a breath, relieved. "His pulse is weak but steady," she murmured. "He's hypothermic, probably in mild shock, but I don't think anything is broken." Noah hovered nearby, his hands balled into fists. "Should we call an ambulance?" Lena hesitated. Under normal circumstances, yes. She was a nurse. Her instinct was to get him to a hospital. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Robert Hale. And if someone had tried to kill him, taking him to a hospital might make it easier for whoever did this to find him. Lena glanced out the window, her stomach twisting with unease. "No," she said finally. "Not yet. We don't know who's looking for him. But Mom..." "Noah." Her voice was firm, though not unkind. "If someone powerful wanted him dead, we could be in danger just by having him here." Noah swallowed hard. He hadn't even thought about that. His mother sighed, standing up and rubbing a hand over her forehead. "We'll keep him here tonight," she said. "If he wakes up and remembers what happened, we'll figure out what to do next." Noah nodded, still feeling uncertain but trusting his mother's judgment. Robert hadn't stirred once. His breathing was shallow but even, and Lena had managed to get him into a dry shirt and wrapped in a warm blanket. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor, watching him like a hawk. He should have felt relieved that the man was stable, but something about this whole situation didn't sit right. Then a thought hit him. "What if the guy who did this already knows he's alive?" Noah said, looking up at his mom. Lena frowned. "What do you mean?" "What if he saw me jump in?" Noah swallowed. "What if he followed me home?" Lena's face paled slightly. She walked over to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Then Noah saw it. A black car parked at the far end of the block. It wasn't doing anything, but it sat there, idling. The headlights were off, but the outline of a person was visible in the driver's seat. Lena dropped the curtain immediately. She turned back to Noah, her voice calm but urgent. "Lock the doors, now." Noah rushed to the front door and slid the deadbolt into place. The man in the black sedan tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, his jaw tight. He had seen the kid pull Hale from the river. He had followed them here, and now he was waiting for instructions. His phone buzzed. A single message appeared on the screen. "Wait, do not engage yet." He exhaled sharply, glancing up at the darkened house. For now, he would wait, but not for long. Noah couldn't sit still. His mind raced with everything that had happened in the last few hours. A man had been nearly murdered. Someone was outside, watching their house. His uncle was on the way, and lying on their couch was the only person who knew why. Then, a sound, a low groan. Noah turned sharply to see Robert Hale stirring. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and hazy. Lena rushed to his side. "Mr. Hale, can you hear me?" Robert's lips moved, but at first no words came out. Then, "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse, his expression filled with confusion. Lena squeezed his hand gently. "You're safe," she said. "You were hurt, but we got you out of the river." Robert blinked slowly. His eyes drifted toward Noah. "You..." His voice was barely above a whisper. "You saved me." Noah nodded. "Yeah." Robert exhaled sharply, his head sinking deeper into the pillow. For a moment, it seemed like he might drift back into unconsciousness. Then, something changed. His eyes sharpened and his body tensed, as if a flood of memories came rushing back all at once. He inhaled, his hand clenching into a fist. Then, he whispered a name. It was Ethan. Lena stilled. "Who?" Robert swallowed, forcing himself to sit up, despite the pain that flashed across his face. "My son-in-law," he rasped. "Ethan tried to kill me." Noah felt a chill crawl up his spine. Lena's expression hardened. Are you sure? Robert let out a bitter, shaky laugh. I'd never mistake his face. He drove me out there. We argued. And then he pushed me over. Noah's stomach twisted. He had seen the moment someone was thrown off the bridge, but he hadn't known the story behind it. Now he did. And it was so much worse than he imagined. Lena frowned. Why would your own family do that to you? Robert closed his eyes, breathing heavily, before finally speaking. Money, power, control. His fingers trembled as he rubbed his temple, struggling to put his thoughts together. For years, I trusted Ethan. I let him into my business. I let him manage my accounts. I believed he had my daughter's best interests at heart, but I was wrong. He swallowed hard. I started noticing missing funds, millions. I confronted him about it. He denied everything. But when I dug deeper, I found the truth. Ethan had been stealing from me for years. Noah's eyes widened. So he tried to get rid of you? Robert let out another humorless chuckle. Yes, because if I disappeared, there'd be no one left to expose him. Lena shook her head in disbelief. So what now? If he thinks you're dead, he won't stop until he's sure. Robert looked at her, his expression grim. That's why we can't go to the police yet. Lena's face darkened. What? If we go now, Robert explained, Ethan will cover his tracks. He's careful. He has connections. He'll make the evidence disappear before the police even get close. Noah could see his mother struggling with the decision. She was a nurse. Her instinct was always to help, to go to the right people and trust that justice would be served. But this was different. If we wait too long, she said carefully, he might find you first. Robert nodded. I know. That's why we have to move fast. I have proof. Bank records, documents that show everything he's done. They're in my house, inside a locked safe in my study. If we can get them, we can take him down. Lena crossed her arms. And how exactly do you plan to do that? I doubt Ethan just left the door open for you to walk back in. Before Robert could answer, Noah stood abruptly, his heart pounding. Mom? Lena turned, and Noah pointed toward the window. The black sedan was still there, watching. Lena's jaw tightened. She grabbed the curtain and shut it firmly. Damn it, Robert exhaled sharply. They've already found me. Noah felt a sharp pang of fear. What do we do? Lena's face was set with determination. We're not waiting around for them to come knocking on our door. She turned back to Robert. You said the evidence is at your house? Robert nodded. Lena inhaled deeply. Then we get it. Tonight. Noah's eyes widened. Tonight? Yes. She turned to Robert. You said it yourself. We don't have time. If we wait, Ethan will erase every trace of what he's done. And if we stay here, we're sitting ducks. Robert met her gaze and slowly nodded. All right. Lena grabbed her phone. I need to call my brother. Noah's stomach flipped. Uncle Joel. Joel had been a detective for years before retiring. He had seen his fair share of criminals. If anyone could help, it was him. Lena tapped the screen, pressing the phone to her ear. Joel? It's me. I need your help. Noah felt his pulse racing. Everything was moving so fast. But he knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. The air in the small house was heavy with tension. The reality of their situation had fully sunk in. Ethan knew Robert was alive, and worse, his men were already watching them. Noah paced near the window, his fingers twitching as he resisted the urge to pull the curtain back for another look. The black sedan hadn't moved, but he could feel the eyes inside it, waiting. His mother, Lena, was on the phone with Uncle Joel, her voice low and urgent. Yeah, they're out there right now, she said, glancing at Robert, who sat on the couch, deep in thought. We need to move fast, tonight. Noah tried to focus, but his mind kept racing. He had saved a man's life, and now the man's enemies were after them. It felt unreal, like something out of a movie. Lena ended the call, shoving her phone into her pocket. Joel's on his way. Robert finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. If we're going to do this, we need a plan. Lena folded her arms. Start talking. Robert took a deep breath. The documents proving Ethan's fraud are in my house, inside my study. There's a safe behind a false panel in the bookshelf. That safe has everything. Bank records, signed agreements, even emails. It's enough to bury him. Lena's brow furrowed. And you think Ethan hasn't destroyed all that already? Robert shook his head. He doesn't know I kept physical copies. He's careful, but arrogant. He thought keeping me silent would be enough. Noah swallowed. So if we get that stuff, we can take him down? Robert nodded. Yes, but getting it won't be easy. Ethan is probably watching my house too. A knock at the door made everyone jump. Lena motioned for Noah to stay back as she peeked through the peephole. When she saw who it was, she sighed in relief and opened the door. Joel stepped inside. He was in his mid-40s, built like a linebacker, but with the sharp eyes of someone who never missed a detail. A retired detective, Joel had seen his fair share of dangerous people, and right now, he looked pissed. He took one look at Robert and exhaled sharply. Damn, Hale, you're supposed to be dead. Robert gave a half smile. Yeah, I noticed. Joel turned to Lena. You weren't kidding. There's a car full of creeps sitting outside like they own the street. They're waiting for something. Lena's jaw tightened. They're waiting for him. Joel nodded and turned back to Robert. All right. You're sure this safe has what we need? Robert nodded. Positive. Joel rubbed his jaw, thinking. Then we need a distraction. If Ethan's guys are watching your place, we can't just walk in. We need to draw them away. Noah's mind was spinning. This was insane. They were planning a break-in at a billionaire's house. Okay, Joel said, finally looking at Lena. I don't like this, but if we're doing it, we do it tonight. Lena nodded. Then let's get to work. They huddled around the kitchen table as Joel laid out their best chance of pulling this off. Joel would create a distraction. He had contacts on the force, and a well-placed anonymous tip could bring a police patrol near Robert's house, forcing Ethan's guys to back off. Noah, Robert, and Lena would enter through the back. Robert still had a spare key hidden in the garden. Once inside, they'd go straight to the study. No wasted time. Joel would wait nearby in his truck. If anything went wrong, they'd have a quick getaway. Robert hesitated, then looked at Lena. If things go south, take Noah and run. No arguments. Lena's eyes hardened. Noah isn't going anywhere without me. Robert didn't push. He knew there was no point arguing with her. By the time darkness settled over the neighborhood, the black sedan was still parked outside. Joel made the call. Yeah, I'm seeing suspicious activity at the Hale estate, he said smoothly. Might want to send a patrol car through. 5 minutes later, the flashing red and blue lights of a police cruiser came into view. It rolled past the parked sedan slowly. The men inside must have noticed because within seconds, the black car pulled away and disappeared into the night. Joel grinned. Works every time. Lena exhaled. Let's move. Robert led the way, keeping to the shadows as they approached the massive estate. Noah had never seen a house this big up close. It was the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a magazine. They crouched near the tall iron fence. Robert reached into a bush near the gate and pulled out a small metal key. He slid it into a side door, and with a quiet click, it opened. They were in. The inside was eerily silent. The mansion, once a place of wealth and power, now felt hollow. Noah's heart pounded as he followed his mom and Robert down a long hallway. Then, a noise. They froze. Footsteps. Someone was still here. Robert's expression darkened. He knew who it was. They hadn't beaten Ethan here after all. He was waiting. Noah could feel his pulse in his throat. The footsteps weren't hurried. They were slow, deliberate, almost as if whoever it was wanted them to know they weren't alone. Robert put a hand on Noah's shoulder, silently motioning for him to stay back. Lena clenched her jaw, instinctively stepping closer to her son. Then, a voice echoed through the dimly lit hallway. You should have stayed dead, Robert. Noah's breath hitched. He didn't need to see the man's face to know who it was. Ethan, the man who had thrown Robert off the bridge, the man who was willing to kill to keep his secrets buried. From the shadows of the study doorway, Ethan stepped into the faint light. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit, his sleeves rolled up, his face, sharp and well-groomed, twisted into an arrogant smirk. In one hand, he held a pistol. Noah's stomach dropped. This wasn't a simple confrontation anymore. Step away from the boy, Ethan said smoothly, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. Robert stayed perfectly still. If you kill us, Ethan, it won't matter. The truth is coming for you." Ethan chuckled, shaking his head. The truth? The truth is whatever I say it is." He took a step closer, keeping the gun steady. "I don't know how you survived, Robert, but I can fix that." Lena tensed. Her eyes darted toward the nearest exit. She wasn't just thinking about escaping. She was calculating, looking for a way to fight back. But Robert shook his head, barely moving his lips. No sudden moves. Ethan exhaled dramatically. "You know, I really did try to clean up the mess the easy way, but you just had to drag these lovely people into it." His gaze flicked to Noah, and for a second, Noah thought he saw amusement flicker in Ethan's eyes. That scared him more than the gun. "You're just a kid," Ethan mused. "You should have just gone home that night." Noah swallowed hard, his hands curled into fists. He wasn't going to let this man intimidate him. He forced his voice to stay steady. "Yeah? Well, you should have checked who was watching before you threw someone off a bridge." Ethan's smirk vanished. Noah's words landed like a slap. His fingers twitched on the gun's grip. Then, crash! The sound of breaking glass shattered the tense silence. It came from outside. Ethan's head snapped toward the window. Robert lunged. In a blur of motion, he grabbed Ethan's wrist and twisted. The gun fired, a deafening explosion of sound, but the bullet struck the ceiling. Lena shoved Noah behind her just as Robert tackled Ethan, both men crashing into a bookshelf. The gun clattered to the ground. Lena didn't hesitate. She kicked it across the room. "Run!" she shouted, grabbing Noah's wrist. But Noah couldn't move. Robert and Ethan were fighting. The two men wrestled for control. Ethan was younger, stronger, but Robert was fueled by something else. Rage, survival, justice. They slammed into furniture, knocking over chairs and a lamp. Ethan threw a punch, hitting Robert in the ribs, but Robert retaliated, driving his knee into Ethan's stomach. Lena grabbed Noah's arm, trying to pull him toward the door. "We need to go, now!" But then, a pair of headlights flooded the room. Noah turned in time to see two black SUVs pulling up outside the mansion. The reinforcements had arrived. Ethan took advantage of the distraction. With a burst of strength, he shoved Robert backward, bolting for the door. Lena pulled Noah toward the opposite side of the house. "There's a back exit!" They sprinted down the hall, Robert staggering behind them. But before they could reach the door, a figure blocked their path. One of Ethan's men, a gun in his hand. Noah barely had time to react. The man raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the sound of a car horn blasted through the air. The house shook as another vehicle screeched onto the property, tires kicking up gravel. Then, gunfire. Noah's stomach flipped. Joel. He must have seen the SUVs and driven straight into the chaos. The man in front of them hesitated for 1 second too long. Robert lunged at him, tackling him to the ground. "Go!" Noah and Lena ran. They burst through the back door, their feet pounding against the pavement as they sprinted toward Joel's truck. Joel threw open the passenger door. "Get in, now!" Lena shoved Noah inside first, then climbed in herself. Gunshots rang out behind them. Noah turned in time to see Robert staggering toward them. But Ethan was right behind him, a gun in his hand, aimed directly at Robert's back. Noah's entire body reacted before his mind did. He grabbed the car door handle and shoved it open. Bam! The car door slammed into Ethan's side just as he pulled the trigger. The shot went wild, hitting the pavement instead of Robert. Joel didn't waste another second. He grabbed Robert by the collar, yanking him into the truck as he slammed on the gas. The truck roared to life, tires skidding against the gravel as they sped away from the mansion. Noah twisted in his seat, watching Ethan disappear in the distance, his expression twisted with fury. For now, they had escaped, but Noah knew the fight wasn't over, not even close. The night air was thick with tension as the truck rumbled to a stop on a secluded street, a few blocks away from Robert's estate. The mansion stood in the distance, cold, dark, and heavily guarded. Noah wiped his sweaty palms on his jeans. His heart pounded like a drum against his ribs. This was it. They were about to break into Ethan's den. Inside the truck, Joel laid out the strategy. His years as a former detective made him the most experienced among them, but even he looked uneasy. "This is a risk," Joel admitted, adjusting the strap on his shoulder holster. "Ethan's people are watching the house. If anything goes wrong, we won't have time to run." "We don't have a choice," Robert said firmly. "The evidence in that safe is the only thing that will put Ethan away. We get it tonight, or we lose our chance." Joel nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but we do this smart." He turned to Noah. "You stay in the truck with Lena. If things go sideways, you drive out of here and don't look back." Noah bristled. He wanted to help. But Lena placed a firm hand on his shoulder, her expression leaving no room for argument. "Joel's right," she said. "This is dangerous, Noah." Noah clenched his fists. He hated feeling useless. But deep down, he knew the best way to help was to stay alive. Joel and Robert slipped out of the truck, moving quickly toward the mansion's perimeter. They stuck to the shadows, staying low. From their hiding spot, they could see the guards, 2 at the front entrance, another patrolling the side gate. Joel pointed to the back. "We go through there." They crept along the fence, reaching the side of the house. Joel pulled out a small flashlight and clicked it on once. A silent signal. Somewhere in the shadows, a man whistled softly in response. The distraction had begun. At the front of the mansion, one of Joel's old police contacts, who had agreed to help, was making noise. The guards at the entrance tensed, shifting their focus. It was all the time Joel and Robert needed. They scaled the side fence and landed inside the property. The mansion loomed over them like a beast, its massive windows dark and foreboding. Robert turned to Joel. "I know the code to the study's side entrance. Let's move." They reached the study door, and Robert quickly punched in a 6-digit code. Click. The door unlocked. Robert slowly pushed it open, the hinges groaning softly. The study was exactly how he remembered it. Mahogany bookshelves, dim lighting, and a grand desk where he had once run his business. But then, a voice cut through the silence. "You really thought it would be this easy?" The hairs on the back of Robert's neck stood on end. In the darkness, a figure stepped forward. "Ethan?" Robert's blood ran cold. Ethan leaned against the desk, completely at ease. In his hand, he held a gun. "Did you really think I wouldn't be prepared?" Ethan mused, tilting his head. "You've always underestimated me, Robert." Joel subtly moved his hand toward his own holster, but Ethan shook his head. He said, his smirk widening. "Let's not make this a mess, gentlemen." Robert took a step forward, keeping his voice steady. "It's over, Ethan. I have proof of everything you've done." Ethan chuckled, the sound low and amused. "That's funny," he said, "because from where I'm standing, you don't have anything." Robert clenched his jaw. "That's about to change." Ethan sighed dramatically. "You know, I really hoped I wouldn't have to do this myself, but you're too stubborn for your own good." His finger tightened on the trigger. Joel moved first. Bang! A single gunshot shattered the air. Chaos unleashed. Joel tackled Robert to the ground as the bullet lodged itself into the bookshelf behind them. The room exploded into movement. Ethan fired again. Joel rolled to the side, grabbing his gun and firing back. The bullet grazed Ethan's arm. He let out a sharp hiss, staggering back. The study door burst open as more of Ethan's men rushed in, weapons drawn. Robert grabbed the nearest object, a heavy paperweight, and hurled it at one of them. Joel fired again, hitting one of Ethan's men in the leg. "Robert, the safe!" Joel shouted. Robert scrambled toward the bookshelf, pressing his palm against the hidden safe's fingerprint scanner. The lock clicked open. His hands trembled as he grabbed the folder inside, a thick stack of documents, USB drives, and bank records. The proof they needed. But then, Ethan lunged. He tackled Robert, slamming him against the desk. The folder spilled onto the floor. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, Noah and Lena were still in the truck when they heard the gunshots. Noah's stomach twisted with dread. "We have to help them," he said, unbuckling his seatbelt. "Noah, wait!" But he was already out of the truck. He sprinted toward the mansion, his heart hammering in his chest. Lena cursed under her breath and followed. They reached the side entrance just as Joel burst out, supporting Robert. Ethan was still inside, yelling orders to his men. "We got it!" Robert panted, holding up the documents. "But we need to go, now!" More gunshots rang out. Ethan's men were coming. Noah grabbed Robert's arm, helping him toward the truck. Just as they reached the vehicle, Ethan's enraged voice echoed behind them. "You can't run from me, Robert!" Noah turned, locking eyes with him. For the first time, Ethan looked truly afraid, because he knew. He had lost. Escape and the next move. Joel floored the gas pedal, and the truck roared down the road. Inside, Robert clutched the folder to his chest. "It's over," he whispered. "We have everything we need." Noah slumped against the seat, his entire body trembling. But despite the fear still clawing at his stomach, he felt something else too. For the first time, they were one step ahead. And tomorrow, the world would know the truth. The truck raced through the darkened streets, the city lights flashing past in a blur. Inside, Robert clutched the folder of evidence like a lifeline, his breath shallow but steady. Joel's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. "We need to move fast. Ethan won't sit on this. He'll send people after us." Robert nodded. "We don't have time to go straight to the police. If we do, he'll bury this before it ever sees daylight." Lena frowned. "Then what's the plan?" Robert exhaled, his mind racing. "We go public." Noah, sitting in the back seat, leaned forward. "You mean, like, the news?" Robert nodded. "I know a journalist, Claire Dawson. She's one of the few people I trust. If we give this to her, she'll make sure the world sees the truth before Ethan can shut it down." Joel checked the rearview mirror. "No time to argue. We're being followed." Noah whipped around, his stomach dropping as two black SUVs appeared behind them. Ethan's men. Joel pressed the gas pedal. The truck lurched forward, speeding down the empty highway. Behind them, the SUVs accelerated, their headlights blazing like hungry predators. "They're gaining!" Lena shouted. Robert's grip tightened around the folder. "We can't let them catch us. If they do, this is over." Noah's heart pounded. "What do we do?" Joel jerked the wheel, swerving onto a narrow back road. The tires screeched, barely holding onto the asphalt. The SUVs followed. A gunshot cracked through the night. The back windshield shattered. Noah ducked instinctively, his pulse hammering. "Get down!" Joel barked. Robert shielded Noah with his body, while Lena covered her head. Another shot whizzed past, missing the truck by inches. Joel gritted his teeth. "Hang on!" He yanked the steering wheel hard to the right, slamming the truck into an alleyway just as another bullet struck the side mirror, sending shattered glass into the air. The SUVs skidded past the alley, momentarily losing them. Joel didn't hesitate. He floored the gas, cutting through the alley and back onto another road. Noah looked back. The SUVs were gone, for now. 15 minutes later, they pulled up to a small, dimly lit cafe, Claire Dawson's usual meeting place. Claire was already there, sitting in a booth in the far corner, her dark-rimmed glasses resting on the bridge of her nose. She looked up, her sharp eyes scanning them. "Robert," she said, setting down her coffee. "I didn't think I'd see you alive again." Robert slid into the seat across from her, placing the folder on the table. "I need your help." Claire flipped open the folder, her eyebrows lifting as she scanned the documents. Bank statements, wire transfers, falsified reports, everything. She exhaled. "Jesus, this is enough to bury Ethan." Robert nodded. "I need you to publish it, immediately. If we go to the police first, he'll manipulate the system. This has to be public before he has time to react." Claire studied him. "You realize this makes you a target?" "I already am," Robert said simply. Claire closed the folder, tucking it into her bag. "All right, I'll get this on every news site by morning." Robert sighed in relief. "Thank you." Claire gave him a small, tight smile. "Don't thank me yet. Ethan is going to fight this with everything he's got." At that very moment, Ethan Foster sat in his office, his face illuminated by the glow of his laptop. The headline on the screen made his stomach turn to ice. Exclusive. Billionaire Robert Hale speaks out. Evidence of massive fraud uncovered. Underneath was a photo of Robert and screenshots of the stolen funds. Ethan's hands shook with fury as he scrolled through the article. "How did they get this?" he snarled, slamming his fist on the desk. A nervous-looking man in a suit stood by the doorway. It's already on 3 major networks, sir. People are talking." Ethan whipped around, his eyes blazing. "Shut it down!" The man swallowed hard. "We can't. It's spreading too fast." Ethan's fingers curled into fists. His carefully built empire was crumbling. But if he was going down, he wouldn't go down alone. He turned to his men. "Find them. Now." At Lena's house, Noah and his mother sat on the couch, exhaustion weighing down on them. Robert was by the window, watching the street. Joel was reloading his gun. Noah's eyes drooped, but before he could drift into sleep, a loud crash shattered the night. The front door splintered open. Ethan's men stormed inside. "Run!" Joel shouted. Noah leaped off the couch, his heart pounding. Lena grabbed him, pulling him toward the back door. Robert tried to fight them off, but one of the men slammed a fist into his ribs, knocking him down. Joel fired a shot, hitting one of Ethan's men in the shoulder. But they kept coming. One of them grabbed Noah's arm. He kicked wildly, struggling against the iron grip. Lena screamed. Suddenly, sirens! The entire room flashed red and blue as police cars swarmed the house. Ethan's men froze. Then, "Drop your weapons!" The officers stormed inside, tackling Ethan's men to the ground. Noah gasped for breath as his captor released him, trying to flee, only to be slammed onto the floor by an officer. Joel lowered his gun. Lena rushed to Noah, pulling him into a tight hug. Robert lay on the floor, breathing hard, but as he looked up, he saw the one person he had been waiting to see. Ethan, standing in handcuffs. His face was pale, his cocky smirk finally gone. For the first time, Ethan Foster had lost. Robert exhaled, the weight of the past few days lifting from his chest. It was over. The next morning, the world watched as Ethan was led into court. The case against him was airtight. The fraud, the stolen funds, the attempted murder, he was done. Robert sat in the courtroom, watching as justice was finally served. Beside him, Noah sat tall, a quiet pride in his eyes. He had saved a man's life, and in doing so, he had changed his own. As the gavel slammed down, Ethan's fate was sealed. Life in prison. Noah let out a breath of relief. He had done the right thing, and he would never regret it. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, spectators, and lawyers filled every seat. Cameras flashed, pens scratched across notepads, and whispers floated through the air like a brewing storm. Noah sat beside his mother, Lena, his hands clenched into fists on his lap. Robert was next to them, his expression unreadable as they waited for the judge's final ruling. Across the room, Ethan Foster sat at the defense table, his usual arrogant demeanor replaced with a hollow stare. He had spent years manipulating people, covering his tracks, and living above the law. But today, his past had caught up with him. The jury foreperson stood, clearing his throat. The room fell silent. We, the jury, find the defendant, Ethan Foster, guilty of embezzlement, fraud, and attempted murder. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom. Ethan's jaw tightened, his fingers gripping the table so hard his knuckles turned white. He whipped his head toward his lawyer, but the man simply shook his head. There was nothing left to do. The judge's gavel slammed down. Ethan Foster, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The room erupted. Some people cheered, others gasped. Reporters rushed to capture the moment. Noah felt Lena squeeze his hand, her eyes glistening with tears. He turned to Robert, who exhaled slowly, as if a weight he had carried for years had finally lifted. For the first time since this nightmare began, it was over, or at least the worst of it. A week later, Noah stood on the front porch of his small home, watching the sunrise. The river, the same one that had changed everything, flowed steadily in the distance. He had spent the past few days processing everything, the danger, the fear, the decisions that had altered the course of his life forever. He had been just a boy fishing by the river, and now he was something else, someone braver, someone stronger. A sleek black car pulled up to the house, snapping Noah out of his thoughts. The door opened, and Robert Hale stepped out, holding an envelope. "Noah," Robert greeted with a warm smile. Noah stepped forward. "Hey, Mr. Hale." Robert handed him the envelope. "I wanted to thank you properly. I owe you my life." Noah hesitated before peeling the envelope open. His eyes widened. Inside was a full-ride scholarship to St. Gabriel's Academy, one of the best schools in the state. I don't understand," Noah murmured. Robert chuckled. "You saved my life. This is the least I can do for you. You have potential, Noah. You deserve opportunities." Noah's hands trembled as he gripped the paper. He had always dreamed of something bigger, but dreams had always seemed just that. Distant, untouchable things. He looked at his mother. Lena's hands covered her mouth, her eyes shining with gratitude. "You don't have to do this," she whispered to Robert. Robert smiled. "I want to." He turned to Noah. "This is just the beginning. You have a future ahead of you, one you get to decide." For the first time in his life, Noah felt like he had a choice, a real choice, a future waiting to be written. That night, Noah walked down to the riverbank alone. The water rippled under the moonlight, peaceful and steady, as if it hadn't been the place where everything had changed. He thought about Ethan, how a man who had everything had thrown it all away because of greed. He thought about Robert, how a man who had lost everything had still found the strength to fight for the truth. And he thought about himself, how a single decision to dive into the river that night had changed not just Robert's life, but his own. He crouched down and picked up a small stone, rolling it between his fingers before tossing it into the water. It sank beneath the surface, but its ripples spread outward, touching everything around it, just like one act of courage, just like him. Noah took a deep breath. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of it. Because of one decision, lives were changed. Robert Hale had found justice, Ethan was behind bars, and Noah had discovered something about himself, the courage to fight for what was right, even when the odds were against him. As Noah looked toward the horizon, he realized that this was only the beginning. He had a future full of possibilities ahead of him, and no matter what came next, he knew one thing for certain. Even the smallest actions can make the biggest difference. What would you have done in Noah's place? Let us know in the comments below. And if you love stories of courage and justice, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss another powerful story.